You are now tuned in to another episode of Bourbon and Books, the Game Recognized Game podcast with RLJ and Kev. On today's edition, we are discussing the book, The Other Westmore by Wes Moore. Cousin Jeff.
What's up? What's up?
What's up, my brother? How you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Another good selection this month.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book nominee or suggestion was brought forth by you, and given everything that's happening in current events with the author of the book, Wes Moore, one, what made you select this book, and then tell the people who Wes Moore is.
Yeah, most definitely. Sometimes you can have conversations with people and they're like powerful conversations that they make you think or they just make you want to know more. I know for me, in terms of folks recommending like a book, if that book doesn't really make me want to pick it up, like run to the store right then, I'm like, eh. So I was actually volunteering in Maryland, and randomly one of my friends was like, I read this book by Wes Moore, and he's going into the book, and it was someone who isn't like an avid reader.
Okay.
And he talked about how he has read this book multiple times, and he's going through different like aspects of the book, not really giving it away, but just like his energy just changed in that conversation. And I was like, I gotta read this book. Like, it's something in this book. And you know what was funny? One of my other friends who was like volunteering in another area, he walked over and he was like, yeah, I read that book before too a while back. It really is a good book. So it was that confirmation of, hey, I really should pick this book up to read. Talk a little bit about, Wes Moore. I'll start from the end of, Wes Moore is currently running to be the first Black governor in Maryland. That's one of the reasons why his name came up. But for folks who may not know him, Wes was born in Maryland. He was a Rhodes Scholar, graduated Phi Beta Kappa, also is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, former CEO. He was a comeback veteran, and he actually wrote this book in 2010. But when you read this book, a lot of things that's being talked about, it's based in Baltimore. It's relevant to today.
Absolutely.
So even something that was written at least over 10 years ago appears like he's talking about events that have happened this year, if not last year.
Yeah, it was as I was reading, I kept going back to see when the book was actually written, because I'm like, this, one, it was kind of relevant, and two, I felt like I was reading The Wire a little bit.
Yep.
The different characters and all that good stuff. So let's jump right in. Typically, we start with when you see the cover of the book or just title alone, what are your thoughts?
I guess, again, for me, I'm gonna call it somewhat cheating because
Fair.
I had like somewhat of a introduction.
Okay.
Again, I'll just say that I was ready to just start just jumping into the book. I had a understanding of what it would be about. I'm sure like your answer is a little bit different than mine.
So I saw this book several times, and I was like, oh, that should be interesting. I added it to a couple reading lists, but I never purchased it. And then as I'm connecting Wes Moore, the candidate, and I'm like, oh, this might be a dope read. I'm really intrigued by the photo on the front. And it appears that one side is in color and the other side could potentially be black and white. Just by the photograph, demonstrating the two different Wes Moores. And so I paid attention to the photography of the cover. And it looks as if it's the the same exact street, just flipped. Like someone did some photoshopping to set the stage for the contents of the book. So one, I was intrigued by that, and the chilling truth is that his story could have been mine, and the tragedy is that my story could have been his. That made me say, "Oh, let's get it." So as you open the book and you began to read, and you heard, read, um, what were some things that stood out to you, or that made you keep turning the page?
So, for those who haven't read the book, one thing that you have to really focus on, the way that the book is written, it bounces back between the two Westmores, and you have to really be focused, because you may get lost on,
You'll
like,
miss it.
okay,
You'll be so confused.
which Westmore are they talking about? And one of the ways that you can kind of keep along with the story is the other, let's just call it characters in the story. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
One West mom is this, this one has this sibling, etc.
Yeah.
One of the things about the book, I think, that kept me intrigued was, I think there's this false reality that people choose to, like, people want to live like in poverty, or people want to live like this tough life. Like, I feel like everyone wants a soft life, or they want the good part of life. Like, they want the first class seat, they want the caviar, they want the sushi, all these things, they want the steak dinner. But something happens along the way, and it puts you off of that course.
Yep.
And I think what kept me intrigued in the story is just like, okay, how did it start, or where did this all kind of like come from? Both West, I would say, like, they came from like good families, in terms of, like, their parents were like pretty good people, decent people. But even having like decent families, that doesn't guarantee you
Facts.
like success or anything. I mean, even just people I know in my personal circle, I know some folks with awesome parents. Kids are all over the place, but I think that's what kept me just turning the page to see what was happening, because it also felt like a drama. One of the words that you kind of used, or you referenced earlier, was, it seemed like you was reading The Wire. For those folks who haven't watched The Wire, based off Baltimore, things that was going on in Baltimore, it literally felt like you was just watching, or you were listening to a story from The Wire. So that's what kind of kept me just going, turning the pages, wanting to learn more.
Yeah, and so as I was reading the two stories, right, I was thinking of The Tale of Two Cities, and I was thinking of other things that we've heard, how individuals kind of had similar stories, but the ending looked different. And so then I started to think about what were some of the like comparisons, and then what were some of the contrasts. One thing that really stood out to me was the essence of brotherhood, with both brothers named Wes. On one hand, one got to go to military school, and a brand new brotherhood was completely formed. He had a brotherhood that was pre-existing before that, but I think much of the brotherhood that was formed there helped shape the trajectory of where he ended. The other Westmore, he had a brotherhood similar to what the first West had, but his never transmogrified into anything else that would force him to change. Instead, it forced him to remain the same. And so when you look at that, They both had support systems, but the support looked completely different. And so it was very interesting, just to see how their lives unfolded that ultimately influence where they are today.
Yeah, and you know, not to go religious a little bit, but I'm when I was reading this story, I think a lot of people, and I don't remember. I mean, they may have hinted at this in the book. I think they actually hinted at this in the book, um, where one Westmore says, I don't think God is with me, or I don't think God is in it, like in Baltimore. And what was interesting to me about that is, I think God was in both of their situations, but it was a bit different. Um, the Westmore who is running to be the governor, I feel like, one, he was a product of prayers of, when I say ancestors before him, his grandparents and things of that sort. But additionally with that, it was like people that was planted in his life that were just kind of just always there to make sure he was doing what was right. However, ultimately decision came down to him to choose the right path. You have the other Westmore who God was in his situation too, but it was like he just always felt the need, or just doing, or he wanted a hard life. But even with wanting a hard life, obviously there were consequences that came with that. But God he was making it so, okay, you're going to get a bruise and a Band-Aid, but it's not anything that is going to take you out. It's not anything that you can't recover from. And at the end of it, there was one who essentially decided, look, I can have a better life. I can make the right decision. And there was another one, it just was like the pull was too strong, and he could not, I feel like, go the way that, again, if we stand on a religious side, that God wanted him to go.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that, and I chuckled when he was talking about the land that God forgot, in the place where they were jumping out of the plane.
Mm-hmm.
And as he was describing that, and then it flipped over to the other West, it kind of felt as if the land that God forgot was also Baltimore. And so the violence, the drug abuse, the abandonment, it was really interesting how I could see the parallelism between the land that God forgot. And one knew God existed and respected it. The other heard that God existed, but he questioned, how is all of this happening around me if God is real?
Right.
And I think, as a black man living in America, I think we've all had that moment where we start to question. Like, I know grandma and them went to church and they did all this on Sunday, and sometimes multiple times during the week. Mom and dad, they might have did this, aunts and uncles, and you've seen everyone in the community. And it works on Sunday, but when you leave Sunday, the church service, and Sunday dinner is over, and then Monday starts, you start to question, like, why ain't this carry over through the week? Like, why are all of these bad things happening to good people? Like, so you start to question the existence, the power, or maybe even the purpose of God within your life. Another thing that I noticed was, and I wrote it down, when they were discussing growing up without a father.
Mm-hmm.
And Westmore, the author, said, no, mine died. And he wasn't there because he couldn't be.
Right.
And the one who was incarcerated said, well, mine was gone because he didn't want to be.
Yeah.
And that made me start to question the theme of the book, or start to just ask this question, like, what is the impact of presence? And then also at the same time, what is the impact of absence? Right? Because technically the author never felt as if he was without a father. He knew that there was a father somewhere within the framework, and the influence and the affluence of the father trickled down throughout the house and how things continued. Whereas on the other hand, the incarcerated Westmore basically spoke like, yeah, this didn't exist. Like this, I didn't have the influence. I didn't have a trickle down effect. Like in his absence, he made sure that there was a system or something in place. Like that didn't exist to me. And so then I started thinking about who filled in the gap for these young brothers, because the father wasn't there for one reason or another, right? So you saw throughout the book the theme of mentorship and how it was important that you find someone within your environment in which you can look to for mentorship, inspiration, and nurturing. Because that's really what these individuals were yearning for when they met a lot of these individuals.
And I would just add with that, like you said, in terms of the author, I think his was coming from obviously his family. His grandfather was a staple in his life. Obviously, when he went off to what I would call boarding school, he found like those mentors and those pillars there. And for the incarcerated Westmore, it was unfortunately his older brother,
Tony,
who still was trying to figure it out. And honestly, he didn't have the ability or the capacity to be like leading someone else. However, I think his brother still understood like right from wrong, and he tried to navigate him not to go that way. But one of the things just as leaders or mentors that we fail to do is like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
And I just think his brother just couldn't see past that. It's like, yeah, you're telling me one thing, but you're doing something else. And even some of those small words that for the incarcerated Westmore that his brother had said to him, like those are the things that drove him. And I don't want to say that was an excuse for his behavior, but he held on so much to it to his own detriment.
Yeah.
And I don't think when his brother was telling him that, he didn't understand the weight, or I don't think like in those moments when he said those, like he didn't want that to translate to what was happening to him in his life.
Yeah.
But like all of the books that we read, Black fathers are so important.
Yeah.
They just are. And and I don't want to view this moment to say like, oh, mothers aren't either, because they are, and mothers typically are the ones that are there. But you can really, as a male, you can really feel the impact of not having like a father in the household.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to child development. Children can't be what children don't see.
Yeah.
And when you look at, I mean, we can go down the whole entire bunny hole on how the absentee father was created, because depending on who you talk to, it was created by systems that helped us get to where we are today, right? When you look at the absence of the Black father in the household, you rob the children of one, seen how to form healthy attachment and relationship styles and coping mechanisms, and like, how do I handle conflict,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if I don't have, two parents in the household, I'm not going to know how to really engage or to do this thing in my house because I don't have a framework or reference point, right? Um, young boys won't get to see how to properly love their wives in the house. They'll see it
Mm-hmm.
out of the house, but where are they more? They're in the house, right? And so young ladies won't get to see how a man should love her when she becomes a man, if that role isn't filled in a healthy manner within the house, right? And so you got to see that play out multiple ways throughout the book. Another thing that I will say that I noticed was the concept or the idea of second chances,
Yeah.
right? That was something that individuals, even certain characters, received often.
Mm-hmm.
The brother that unfortunately will be in prison until he transitions from this world received so many second chances and so
Oh, yes.
many opportunities for him to realign himself. But his support system wasn't strong enough to support the realignment.
Yeah.
The first Westmore, the author of the book, he had a lot of second chances because he was taken out of the environment that was imbruing him, sent to military school, and that opened up so many opportunities and exposed him to so many things that his zip code was not going to permit him to do.
And like he talks about, he wasn't a saint.
Oh, absolutely.
I just want to let the readers know, like, they both were going down paths that were not going to lead to good
at all.
But also too, good can come from a bad situation.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I think a lot of people just think like, everything got to be so good to get good. No, you can get good from a situation that is not ideal and what it's supposed to be. One of the things the book talked about, which I thought was very interesting, one of the lines were, every city lives a double life.
True.
And I thought the same for people. Every person lives a double life. And that statement, in this book, it plays out in so much. You got two people, same name. Essentially, it's like a double life. It's one person on one life, another one on a different life.
Yeah.
Also, too, I think it's just about, from an everyday standpoint, most people can be, they can be guilty of living a double life. Now, obviously, not just jump into someone being promiscuous, but, you have your professional persona, and then like you have your after five.
Fair.
During the day, I'm Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Don't call me Jeff.
Yeah.
After five, you can call me Jeff. So that whole thing about, double life, I thought that line was very, very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Very intentional in the book. And since we're on this whole frame or this language about intention, I truly believe that certain people have divine, like, was it intervention on their lives?
Okay.
Like, let me tell you, I believe, like, you really have to mess up what is in line for you. It kind of goes back to, like, what God has for me is for me.
Yeah.
Now, God may have X for you. He never meant for you to go left, right, up, down, whatever, but X is still going to be there.
Yeah.
And I feel like as an individual, as a human, we decide how we're going to get to X. But I truly believe the author of this book, like, it was divine intervention on his life, just from a standpoint of his village, his family. even with him going to the academy, his mom like reaching out to family members saying, hey, I see where my son is going. It's just very important if I can just kind of just scrape up this money for him to go there.
Yeah.
With them even having an opportunity to move in with family in Brooklyn, because they could have easily said no. With his granddad essentially mortgaging off his paid off house in order to pay, the last bit of money. And I even look at how Wes Moore, the author, he interned in the mayor's office.
Yeah.
It's like a 360 moment. I mean, he just really had to step into, I feel like, a role that had already has his name on it.
Yeah.
And, the folks who because again, I really didn't know about Wes Moore. And, I'm probably late to the game. And this is probably just a couple of months ago. But the way that people talk about Wes Moore right now, the author, they're basically saying, look, this man can and is a very high probability that at some point he could be a candidate for the president of the United States. It's just like mind blowing. And again, I think like sometimes in life, sometimes you just have to show up.
That's good. That's good. That's good. And I think many of us, for one reason or another, we have a fear of showing up, so we don't. Right? It's that imposter syndrome. I think back, there was a quote that talked about, where is it? From his introduction, he says, I was surprised to find out how much we did have in common aside from our names and how much our narratives intersected before they fatefully diverged. Learning the details of his story helped me understand my own life and choices. And then when we were talking about second chances, also from the introduction, Wes said, from everything you told me, both of us did some pretty wrong stuff when we were younger. And both of us had second chances. But if the situation or the context where you make the decisions don't change, then second chances don't mean too much. I guess It's hard sometimes to distinguish between second chances and last chances. Bro, like, and that was just the introduction. And I reread the introduction and I tried to put some stuff into perspective, like, shit. Some of this is coming from a brother who won't get to see the other side of the prison wall ever again, in person. Pictures, television, social media, windows, but that's the extent. And so to be in a situation where you are forced to really process, deal with the regret, disappointment, and devastation, all of your decisions, that's a powerful thing, man. Like, I don't think people understand how heavy that concept is. I think that's what made me continue to read the book. I think that's what made me continue to dive in, and I was able to see both sides. And sometimes I had to reread a section and look at it from the other Wes's perspective. And it was powerful to me. So, like, just to think, two individuals who grew up minutes apart, who were going down the same path, just on different streets. How important having people around you that can prophetically see that this is not how your life is going to end, and being able to say that, or being able to recognize, being able to recognize that we all have an earthly assignment that was created in the spiritual realm. And that assignment may not be to propel me.
Sir, don't preach right now.
And that really made me sit here and think, like, a lot of the things that we are called to do, not things that we think of on our own, right? But things that we are called to do help to propel someone else's journey.
Yep.
And if we fail to show up, where does that leave them? And I think that helps. This book helped me to realize the sense of altruism that I was taught, the willful submissions of one's wills and wishes for the wills and wishes of another. Like, when you see a need, being able to look beyond the person that is in need and see how that need can help fulfill another aspect and further propel someone along their journey. I think when you get out of the me and focus on we, I think that's where we can get. Malcolm X said, when you change I to we, illness goes to wellness. And so when we get out of that selfish concept, and my mentor, as we're talking about mentors, my mentor once told me, he said, well, you take care of the things that you're called to do. Someone else is taking care of the things that's called to do that benefit you.
Powerful.
Right? And so when you stop focusing on what can I get, and because your job isn't to focus on that, your job is to focus on what you've been called to do, to help in the spaces where you are, right? To be a light in the corner where you are. You focus on what you're called to do, and then everything else will be added to you.
And it made me think of, some people say it's we over me.
Yeah.
One of the lines out of the book, the author says, I snuck in despite coming up in the margins. I said, sir, let me do a little dance, because, and it made me think about my own life. And, I'll give a quick anecdote. Specifically if my parents listen, I don't think I ever shared this. So growing up, I'm the oldest of three, and I used to always want to hang out with my older cousins. They were older, they were cooler, they were doing things before I had the opportunity or ability to do it, like having, their car, or going out, or, they had a girlfriend, whatever. So growing up, every weekend, I want to hang out with my cousins. I remember it was a Sunday, and typically I would stay at their house from Friday to Sunday. Sunday, supposed to be going back home. And I ain't gonna lie, even at that age, I was nerdy, I had to get back home to, I hung out, but I understood I need to do my homework, man. Like, I gotta be ready on Monday. And my cousins, they wanted to ride out, like, to the beach. So we like riding out to the beach. And, obviously my cousins did things that was admirable and things that were not so admirable. And one of those was like smoking weed. I'll just say, for the record, I've never smoked weed, mainly because I grew up with bronchitis and my chest used to be on fire.
You would have died anyway.
It used to be on fire. And I was like,
I completely understand. We good over here. We good over
right.
here.
I'm like, I ain't doing it. It would be a group of 4 people. I'd be like, nope, I'm good. Like, y'all ain't sitting with me when I be going to the doctor's office.
Nope. So
we're going to the beach, and if you know anything about Florida, we're literally riding down to let's just call it, it's not the boardwalk, but it's the last street that goes perpendicular, I think, to the water. Okay. Nonetheless, smoke is coming out of the car. They're smoking, whatever. We get pulled over. I said, see, my mama told me to go home. And I was just like, this whole time, like, man, we about to go to jail. Like my parents gonna be so distraught. Like, what is this gonna do to, like, me the rest of my life, whatever. We get pulled over. Oh, and at this point, we was not legal as it is like today. We're talking about years ago. we're sitting on the side of the street, handcuffed, sitting. Like I'm on the side of the street looking like a criminal. That I'm not like I'm far beyond that. And I guess the little bud that he was smoking, because they were smoking, like he put it in his dashboard, but it was so like far down, like you really had to be searching that car to look, like you could smell it.
Mm-hmm.
And they started smoking, not to get all intricate, like Black and Miles and cigarettes, whatever. But I'm literally holding my breath, making sure like they don't find something, because guess what? They may say, look, all y'all gonna
For possession. Yeah.
exactly. Or hell, who knows? They may say it was mine because they probably like been in some stuff already.
Yep.
That's like one of the defining moments of my life, just from a standpoint. I was like, look, I can hang out with people, but I know this not where my life's supposed to be going. And I don't, and I just saw, when we talk about coming up in the margins, I just felt like for me, that was a scenario that could have literally went the wrong way, and who knows what would have happened next. I just don't feel like I would be probably where I am today at this point. I may have gotten here, but there would have been a lot of hills and valleys that I felt like I would have had to overcome.
It would have looked a lot different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of those moments where, as the old folks, right? I think of what the old folks used to say. Had it not been for the Lord who was on my side. Because I was talking to one of my friends, her son was going away to college. And, everybody, we got Facebook nieces and nephews. Everyone's going to school. And so I had a connection to him through his mother, and we were friends. And so he hit me up out of the blue, and we had a conversation for like 2 hours just on like things that he had questions about, and he wanted a black male's perspective. So, we're chatting, and he asked a question. He said, well, have you ever been involved in something that could have gone the other way? And I smiled. I said, yes. And every day I get a reminder of what I thought I wanted and what it could have turned into. Right? Like, there's a few examples where I was DJing in a club one night. Saw a bad shorty. So glad brother started shooting. Right? I'm just glad because it caused everyone to go in different directions. And so my opportunity to connect with this young lady was now gone. Luckily, no one got hurt. And I said, man, I ain't gonna say his name, had X, Y, and Z not came in and wanted to air out the place, I probably would have been in a situation that I couldn't have got out of. Sad to say, right? But as I see the individual on social media and I see where her life has landed her, I'm just like, I don't want any part of that. I didn't want any part of that. But, you seeing things that look appetizing at the buffet, what do? You put it on your plate. And I'm so glad that X, Y, and Z wanted to air the club out that night. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, sometimes tragedy has to happen for us to realign with our trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I've been in several situations like that where it's like, oh, I think this is what I want. And then God would be like, now, listen, I gave you better, but let me show you. Let me just show you why this wasn't what you wanted. You'd be like, ooh, Jesus, you got glasses I could wear? Because, like, had you had given me just an inch of this vision that you're just showing me now, I wouldn't have even walked towards that which was not for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I'll be, the DC area is small but mighty, right? And you're like, oh, okay, it's so many people. It's rare that you would run into it's rare that you run into people.
That's a lot.
Bruh, you would think, right? I've been in so many places and seen people. I'm just like, ooh, like, ooh, I'm so glad I didn't answer the phone call that night. Ooh, like, God, boy, you got a sense of humor, boy. Like, but it's all about that one small, minuscule event that could have changed our trajectory permanently. Because a lot of those things you can't come back from, i.e., the brother who is now incarcerated. Can't come back from that. And a lot of that was just a bad decision. One bad decision. And granted, the situation didn't necessarily have to go as far as it did. Mm-hmm. Right? So they robbed the store. They didn't have to like execution style, fire out the window, point blank range. They could have just let it go.
Yeah.
But in that short amount of time, it was his life changed beyond what he could have even imagined. And I think of the quote from one of the men from the military school. I think he was retiring or something, and he said, "When it's time for you to leave this school, leave your job, or even leave this earth, you make sure that you have worked hard enough to make sure it mattered that you were even here." Bro, that was a powerful quote, because I'm just like, what am I doing on a day-to-day basis that is, making sure that my existence on this Monday mattered? That me showing up at this event to support one of my best friend's sons, that this mattered. Like, where is my focus? Like, is my focus on personal fulfillment, or to make sure that when I expire, it mattered that I was here?
Yeah.
So on the Black Power Fist scale, my brother, what are we rating the other Westmore?
I think this is one of the momentous occasions. I wish others were here to witness it. I can see why people read this book multiple times.
Yeah.
I think you could gain something different every time you read it. One of the insights that you said, which when I reread this again, it is just listening from one side of the story and just seeing like, what are you getting from it? I think if you're a Black male, you can relate to this. There are probably so many aspects of each of these Westmore lives that you can relate to, whether that be, something with your father, something with your family or village, like you talked about before, brotherhood. We talked about second chances. I think that was a powerful statement that you quoted from the book, in terms of, is this a second chance or is this a last chance?
Last chance,
And sometimes we find that out like too late. But it's important that as we go through our daily lives, like you said, we're thinking about like the impact that we will leave when it's all said and done. This was a really good book, and even from like the, aside from the book standpoint, folks who always talk about Westmore, the author, they said like he is just like a great guy. Like the way that he communicates with he feel like it makes you feel as if like he knows you, or it's one of like your best friends and things of that sort. So I would be interested to, I guess, just learn more about him. I don't know if there will be a continuation of this book. To your point, even after Westmore had accomplished so much in his life, I do think him meeting the other Westmore, now the incarcerated Westmore, I still think that had an impact on him.
Absolutely.
If he does win this election, I do think this story, it will play a part of some of his decision making, which would be, for the good of Maryland. Like I talked about before, every city lives a double life. There is good that can come from a city. One thing about Baltimore, I just say Baltimore, I feel like people always just kind of revert to like the negativity of it. But I feel like it's time to change the narrative. A couple of things the book talked about that I wasn't even aware of. I think it said like Babe Ruth and Thurgood Marshall. Like these are folks who are from Maryland, and it's information that gets glossed over because everybody just want to talk about like murder capital. Now, there are things that need to be changed, but the whole purpose of me saying that is, look, we can change the narrative. There's always good in a situation. With all of that being said, I give this book its highest rating. I suggest that everyone read it. You're going to probably end up reading it a second time. And it is something that I know a conversation will be had afterward.
Absolutely. I agree with this. If you didn't give it a 5, I was going to talk shit. I actually had a few points to make an argument if you didn't, but now that you gave it a 5, we don't even have to discuss that. It's a 5 for me too, bro. Like this was a good selection. Thank you for picking this, and this was a book that made me reflect on a lot of stuff. Yeah. And so to Westmore, and to the other Westmore, thank you for sharing your light and your life within the bounds of this book, and we hope that it has impact beyond what they could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
For years to come. And we hope that it also helps individuals to consider, is this a second chance or is this my last one?
I think this also is a good book as a mentor to give to a mentee.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It does. It level sets, and it sets the stage for, the bridge builder. Like, I'm not building the bridge for me. I'm building the bridge for the ones that come behind me.
Yeah.
So, well, that's it, man. That's this edition of Bourbon and Books with the Game Recognized Game podcast. RLJ and Kev. Cousin Jeff.
What's up?
I'll holler at you next time.
Be light.
I was saving that for you because I knew you wanted to scream. Be light.